Bell, Tampa Bay traded for him. He comes to Tampa Bay, they didn't win. Signs a big contract with the Cubs, they don't win. Joe Torre was a terrible manager with the Braves and the Cardinals and the Mets, and went to the Yankees. He won, and the reasons for that is because they have really good players, and the Cubs have really good players. But again, the baseball season is really long, takes a lot of good fortune, good luck, and there are other teams that are hungry, including the Pirates this year, are really hungry to try and get back on top and get back to the postseason.
Yeah, they definitely are. They fell short last year. I had the pleasure of attending some of those games on the road at Petco Park. Not one, it was for a 3-game skid. I was there for 2 days. Had nosebleeds. Well, they won. I had floor seats near the field, and they lost. So when we talk about the Pirates, when we talk about what they're doing, you were there in Bradenton, of course. Spring training's clearly ending and being the end-all for the Pirates. When I look at this rotation, when I recall the move to get Melanson out of Pittsburgh because they believe that they didn't have all that talent locked up in one guy, they needed to make a move, and Nova, including another player clearly not on the roster now, they re-signed Nova to a longer deal. Was that Melanson deal originally designed to pull in better pitchers as a part of the overall rotation for the Pirates to make them contenders, which is where they had lacked last year?
Well, I think twofold. Number one, I think Neil Huntington is maybe the most underrated general manager in baseball. For having to work under restrictions, budget restrictions in a small revenue city. With a small revenue ball club like the Pirates, the fact that they went to 3 straight postseasons last year, we're hoping is an aberration. Though, as he said when he took over about 10 years ago, what he was hoping was that the Pirates would play meaningful baseball into September. And we're talking about a franchise that went through 20 straight years of losing, and rarely did the team play any important games on September the 1st in those 20 years. The fact that they even went into September last year and they were still playing important games is pretty remarkable. So part of his formula has been that when they can't afford a player to keep him beyond his final year of a contract, and they can't re-sign him, then rather than just lose him, he tried to get something for him. They knew there's no way they're going to be able to re-sign Melanson. And come the trade deadline, they got an opportunity to pick up a couple of outstanding arms, including Felipe Rivero, who is lights out. And I've been saying, Rudy, that if he continues along this path, the stuff he has is almost Aroldis Chapman-like. He could be that good in the next couple of years. So if the fact they could acquire someone like that for Melanson, and Tony Watson stepping in as the closer, that's the reason he made that deal. And re-signing Nova, a lot of people said the Pirates wouldn't be able to afford it. There's no way they can bring him back. They lost Jay Happ to the Toronto Blue Jays when Happ signed a big contract. Well, Nova and his agent decided that Pittsburgh was a good fit. They worked out a 3-year deal, and he's a nice piece to have in the middle of a rotation. Good veteran presence, throws a ton of strikes. One of the more remarkable stats all last year was after Nova came to the Pirates, he walked a total of 3 batters total in all of his Pirate starts. It was the greatest control of any pitcher in Pirates history who started and threw more than 50 innings in a season. So pretty remarkable stuff, and I think the Pirates are an underrated club and have a chance to do some damage this year.
I do as well. I look at the Pirates. I looked at the games that they should have won last year, and a lot of it had to do with the slump of Andrew McCutchen. So many rumors, so much conversation surrounding what should McCutchen do. Should the Pirates trade him? I don't think they were going to do that at all. I think they're wanting to find out if he can bounce back from a lackluster season last year where he clearly did not have the swing of an MVP. He didn't have the mechanics as an MVP at the plate. And clearly in spring training, that has been relatively different. And more notably in the World Baseball Classic, where he just basically exploded at times where he was needed to in the batting rotation to make a difference. Do you think that based on what you see at the World Baseball Classic that he can bring that type of bat and attitude to the Pirates that is more needed probably now more than ever?
Well, certainly we will. I think everybody's got their fingers crossed that he'll have a bounce back year, and that maybe that was a sign that he had some clutch hits in the WBC for Team USA. Because he was away for about 3 weeks, along with Josh Harrison, Gregory Polanco, and Sterling Marte. I think the last two guys playing for the Dominican Republic, they missed a lot of spring training, and so they're now getting back in there and getting some at bats. McCutchen looks good, but I'll be quite honest with you, he looked good in previous springs. He looked good last spring, and he just got off to a terrible start. I have a personal opinion that it's possible. We'll never know the answer to this, Rudy, but it's very possible that analytics and sabermetrics kind of conspired to force him to have the early season struggles that he had. That's my opinion. That it was because they hit him second rather than third, where he's used to. He's out of his comfort zone. They played him shallower in center field. I think that messed him up defensively. He was like a fish out of water. And by the time he regrouped, they put him back in the 3-hole in June. It took him some time to recover, and he did. He had a good, solid last couple months of the season. I think that's what they're hoping, that he is. There's no doubt he's going to hit third again this year. He's playing right field, which is unusual territory for him, but in terms of how he looks out there, for the short time that I've seen him, he looks quite comfortable in right. And he plays best when he plays with a chip on his shoulder. I think that's going to be critical. It's always been best for McCutchen when it's kind of me against the baseball world, and I'll show you that I'm one of the great players. And I think he's out to show everybody that he's still an MVP caliber player. And with that, the Pirates are a playoff contending team. I think the team also collectively plays better with a chip on its shoulder. And so, again, fingers crossed he's healthy. He gets off to a good start, and he has a really great bounce-back season. That's what we're hoping.
Well, hopefully so. When I look at the way McCutchen played in 2015, how he played last year, 2016, look, from my perspective, and I've watched these games just like anybody else. Of course, I'm on the West Coast, a little bit more of a struggle for me unless they come locally. They'll be in Los Angeles playing against the Dodgers this May. When I look at the Pirates and I look at Andrew McCutchen, it's almost as if he had taken his own win out of the building. There was no desire at the plate. It's almost as if he said, "Well, now here I am. I'm part of the rotation now. I'm in the third spot or the fourth spot." It's almost as if he took that attitude and that mentality into the game in, game out throughout the season. And I don't know. I'm looking for Andrew McCutchen to be the Andrew McCutchen-like MVP style. The biggest question is whether or not he can find his way to not only stay healthy, but have a bounce-back season. Do you believe that if he falters somewhere during the season, that Huntington would feel the pressure from fans and from the lack of production to move him out of Pittsburgh?
Well, the problem with that is, like anything, like any sports team, sports fans want to move players that aren't productive. They want to keep it. In fact, it was last spring training, when spring training started, we heard for, I think, a second or third straight year from local writers and then from fans on talk shows and such, the Pirates need to extend Andrew McCutchen's contract. And then as the season went on, when he looked bad, there was talk about the Pirates should trade Andrew McCutchen. It's hard to move a player and get anything for him when he's not performing. And one of the reasons the Pirates were able to get a guy like Felipe Rivero and another pitcher in that trade that's hopefully a starter down the road for the Pirates in that Mark Melancon deal was because Melancon was at the top of his game. He's one of the best closers in the league. So the best case scenario for me is McCutchen has a bounce back year all year, takes the Pirates to the postseason, maybe wins a World Series. He still has another year left, an option year left on the contract that the Pirates would pick up, and then see what happens next year. If he continues to show greatness. It takes two to tango. It's not automatic that he would be traded, though, if he wants to test the free agent market, which would be his final opportunity, I'm sure, before he retires. This would be the last big-time deal he could garner. That's up to him, but it's also up to him to decide if he wants to stay a Pirate. He would have to take less money, and it would be a very team-friendly contract, but that's in his hands, and we'll see. So again, I think the best-case scenario, McCutchen plays great, the team plays great, gets back to the postseason. If McCutchen plays great and the team is awful, then I think you got a good chance of moving him by the deadline at the end of July. But I think that the two go hand in hand. I think when McCutchen is great, the team is great. There's a reason why the Pirates returned to the postseason for the first time in 20 years in 2013. It's because McCutchen had an MVP year. And they won, 2 years ago, they won 98 games, second highest wins total in all of Major League Baseball, just 2 years ago. And McCutchen again had a great year and received MVP votes. I think finished third in voting. So the two go hand in hand. He plays great. The team is great. That again is the best case scenario. If he doesn't play well and the team doesn't play well, it's hard to move a player, to trade a player like that, because you're not going to get as much for him. So that'll be a difficult decision to make midsummer if the Pirates are essentially out of the race.
Right. I look at this Pirates baseball club and I think to myself, what did they do that was such a splash in the lottery, or whether it was free agency, or there's so many different capacity. People, look, everybody can tune in right now. You can call and ask Greg Brown a question, 216-539-9967. When you look at the NL Central, and there are so many questions, I think more questions are still more directed towards the Pirates and the lack of moves that they make. Of course, again, I'm not a Yinzer. I'm not a guy there in Pittsburgh. I'm on the outside looking in. But when you look at this club overall and the fact that they've been contenders, year in and year out, you have to ask yourself, are these players, or the ones that Neil Huntington acquires, the ones that are part of this rotation defensively, offensively, do they have enough to get them through the regular season? I mean, does Garrett Cole stay healthy? Who do they have as a part of the pitching rotation other than Nova to be a sure starter to help them see September?
Well, I think it does start with Garrett Cole. Again, going back, Rudy, to 2015. Garrett Cole won 19 games, had an ERA under 3. I think it was 2.5. I believe he finished 4th in Cy Young voting. Pitched close to, if not more than 200 innings. Was one of the best pitchers in baseball. Again, the team won 98 games to have him at the top of their rotation. Then last year, he goes on the disabled list 3 different times. He's not healthy, and the team drops to 78 wins. Teams that win have outstanding pitching staffs, starting with the top of their rotation. And the Pirates, when healthy, have one of the best pitchers in baseball in Garrett Cole. He seems like a man on a mission, going back to the chip on the shoulder. He seems to have that mentality right now that he is going to be great. He only has a couple more years left under contract before he tests free agency. He has the super agent Scott Boras representing him. So there's no doubt in my mind that he will indeed test the free agent market. But in order for him to get the mega contract that he desires, he has got to pitch. And so this year and next year are critical for him and Scott Boras. And they know that. So I think we'll see him pitch every 5 days. I think he'll be great. When I've said before, all Cole has to do is go out there and pitch. He's that good. If he goes out there every 5 days, 200 innings, he'll win close to 20. He'll have an ERA under 3. He'll win a ton of games. Pirates win a ton of games. They get back to the postseason. He does have a strong cast behind him. Pretty inexperienced, admittedly, other than Ivan Nova, the veteran. He's got Jameson Taillon, who was also a top-round pick of the Pirates a few years ago, but was off the radar because he had Tommy John surgery, missed a year. When he came back rehabbing from that, suffered a sports hernia, had to have surgery for that. So in essence, he missed 2 years of the mound, finally got back to competitive baseball, and pitched for the Pirates most of last year, or most of the second half of last year anyway, and showed why the Pirates had him as a top round pick. He is maybe, not only is he as talented as Cole, but he might be a tad better in terms of what he can offer in ancillary skills. He has an incredible mentality. I mean, he soaks up every part of the game, every facet of pitching. He is well advanced in terms of his mindset, and looks like the real deal. I think he's a man amongst boys, and so it's hard to say it because he's unproven. We're only based on a half year of Major League Baseball experience, but I think you're going to hear a lot of Cy Young talk when it comes to Jameson Taillon. Now that's a fairly big if to some, not to me, because I think he's the health issues are behind him. He's strong. He's ready to go. You've got Cole, Taillon, Nova, 1, 2, 3. That's it's going to be as good as it gets.
Yeah.
Chad Kuhl pitches at the fourth spot of the rotation. I talked to Jim Leland the other day again about Chad Kuhl. Leland, of course, the World Baseball Classic gold medal winning manager for Team USA and a former Pirate manager and Tiger skipper. Took the Marlins to the World Series in 1997. He loves Chad Kuhl. And I asked him about Garrett Cole and Jameson Taillon. The first guy he says is, man, I don't know, I love this Chad Kuhl guy. So that's very meaningful from a guy like Jim Leland. And then on top of that, you got this Tyler Glass now, who's considered the top prospect in the organization, and scouts just salivate over him. He had an ERA under 2 last year in the minor leagues. He's done everything he can to prove he's as good as any pitcher in the minor leagues in baseball. And now looks like he's going to win the 5th spot of the rotation. That has the makings, Rudy, of being New York Mets-like. Everybody talks about the Mets rotation. The Pirates rotation might be talked about in those type of circles as the season goes on. We'll just have to wait and see. But they have the potential to absolutely be great.
I think so as well. There's another player that you touched on, and it was Tyler Glass. Now, of course, the scouts are just running amok trying to find this guy, trying to find a way to watch him. But one thing I did notice in the last start that he had was during his changeup, it was almost as if the release was untimely. Balls got away from him. Cervelli wasn't able to capture those, allowing runners to basically float around from first to second, putting them in a wrist, which is runner in scoring position for those that don't know, and enabling that team to basically go around him. Is there something about his release during his changeup that needs to change slightly to give him a better feel on the mound, or does he have to change his release altogether to make sure those balls hit the plate?
I think occasionally he's such a tall-bodied guy. He's 6'8", lanky. That occasionally that release point, he holds on to the ball maybe too long, and you'll see that on occasion. But you don't see that as much as you used to with him. And I think he's got this modified wind-up now, where he keeps his arms close to his body, not a lot of movement with it. That's done to kind of help his control issues. Again, because when you're as tall and lanky and long-armed as he is, that stuff can get away from you. I think it'll probably always be a guy that, on occasion, has a little struggle with a release point now and then. But that can be one of those guys who's effectively wild, because he can throw 96, 97, 98 miles an hour. That'll give the hitter something else to think about. I like the fastball. He's got a tremendous curveball. He's been working on that changeup. He's been working on a 2-seamer. He's got the physique of the perfect major league pitcher. And I really think that if he figures this thing out, the Pirates have an ace on them. You really have in Glass now, Garrett Cole and Jameson Taillon, potentially 3 aces in that rotation. Not many teams can boast that. Again, yeah, they're unproven for the most part, other than Cole, who had that great year 2 years ago. But if these guys put it all together, it's going to be lights out, and it's going to be the best. It will be, again, if they realize their potential, those three and Nova and Chad Kuhl, I'm saying again, it'll be the best rotation in baseball if they figure it out.
I hope they figure it out early and often. And there's another player that is clearly not a part of any rotation at all and clearly denied a visa, and that is, well, Kang. And I look at Jung Ho, and I look at the situation with the drunk driving and the types of anomalies. And I call it an anomaly because it's not something that you relatively find from a high and a very low-key guy in Jung Ho Kang to now have visa issues trying to get into the U.S. Are the Pirates really concerned about this, or is this a next man up theory? Despite not having Kang in the lineup now, that could change early on in the season as it gets started.
Well, they're going about their business as if he's not going to be part of the club, and they know he won't be opening day. They are hopeful, optimistic is what the term that our team president, Frank Coonley, used yesterday on an interview. Optimistic that when U.S. immigration authorities see the latest paperwork, and he's been denied a visa the first time, that once they see this paperwork, that they'll get it all straightened out and he will be in the States, hopefully sooner rather than later, and that when he does arrive, Frank Coonley said we're going to put our arms around him and welcome him back and help him become the type of human being and man that they know he can be. But, it is 3 strikes at 3 drunk driving arrests in Korea, and so there will be no 4 strikes, you're out. This will be it. He's got no others. He's got 3 chances. He'll not get a 4th, so he'll have to be on his best behavior when he does arrive. But as of now, they're going about their business without him. It's a big bat not to have. I think he's got the potential, certainly, of a 30-homer guy, if not a 40-home run guy, and that's just power you don't find every day. And in the meantime, David Freese will patrol third base most nights. Josh Harrison, who has bounced around before, became a starting second baseman last year. He has a chance to bounce around again to help at third base. And Adam Frazier, a young kid out of Mississippi State who got his feet wet in the big leagues last year as just a pure hitter, he'll play a lot of third base as well. So they think they've got it covered. It's hard to make up for that power, but they hope to win games in other ways until Gung gets back, and as I said, hopefully sooner rather than later.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you there. As far as being on a short leash, that's exactly what's going to happen when he arrives back here in the States, if in fact that does occur. I suspect that to be the case for him because of past incidents. They'll be keeping a very close eye on him, and I mean the Pirates organization as a whole. Moving on, we're talking about the Cardinals. I suspect third place for them behind the Pirates, and the only reason why I'm making that statement is because Gong will find himself back in the rotation, again, based on the fact that he does get back into the lineup for the Pirates. That is the power position spot cleanup, essentially. What are your thoughts on the Cardinals being in third, and do you think that that's something that he can be a part of later on to power hit their way through this Cardinals team who basically ended up almost in last place last year?
It's just it's so hard to predict these in spring training. What's going to happen? Who would have predicted a year ago at this time that I certainly didn't. I don't know anybody that said the Cleveland Indians would take the Chicago Cubs to 7 games in the World Series and have a chance to win it. Reaching the postseason was a pipe dream, in my opinion, for the Indians, from afar anyway. So it's so hard to predict. Injuries just become such a big part of the game. It's such a long year. The Cardinals seem to always find a way. You can never discount them. I do think it's no disrespect to the Reds and Brewers. I do think it's going to be a 3-team race. And again, a lot will have to happen to the Cubs. I mean, they're going to have to fall back a little bit they're going to have to suffer, not that I'm rooting for it, but they're going to have to suffer some injury, I think, and significant fall off from some of their star players for them not to win the division. But anything can happen. I do like the way the Pirates played them head-to-head toward the end of last year. It's like they all of a sudden figured out Jake Arrieta, which was huge because Arrieta has owned the Pirates until much of the second half of last year. And again, it's almost like someone told them a secret. They figured it out, and they knocked him around a couple times toward the end of the year. I think that'll be big. But, the head-to-head matchups will be huge when it comes to the Pirates, Cubs, and Cardinals. How do they do head-to-head? You figure they're going to make hay against the Brewers and Reds. They should anyway. And then it just might come down to those head-to-head matchups. But you just can never, ever count out the St. Louis Cardinals. They've got Dexter Fowler there now. The Cubs, believe they were a contender before, but then when they had Fowler return last year, they thought that was the thing that put them over the top. He's a leader, a guy at the top of the batting order that can do damage, gets on base, great outfielder. We'll see what that does to their lineup, and Adam Wainwright is key. Wainwright looked like he was about finished early on last season, and then for the second half, looked like the old man figured it out. If he has, that'll be huge also. Again, it's such a long year. It's just impossible to predict what might happen during the course of a season.
It's very tough indeed. I'd like to welcome Cory Aldridge, former Major League Baseball slugger. Cory, hey man, thanks for calling in. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me, man. Sorry, a little late, but better late than never.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. Welcome Greg Brown as well to the Rude Dog Show. This is Rudy Reyes. Download the app. Call in 216-539-9967. You can call in and ask either one of these gentlemen who've been a part of baseball clubs for a better part of their life. Look, Cory, when we're talking about the St. Louis Cardinals, and Greg hit on a really good point here, that swap with the Cubs, certainly as a part of their pitching rotation, could, in fact, find themselves in better favor. I still believe that despite that, with Aldridge Diaz having a great rookie year last year with batting over 300 with 17 homers, do you think St. Louis Cardinals could creep up and maybe give the Cubs some type of damage moving into, let's say, September?
How my views always are is veterans win championships, and I think they have a good core. The formula for me has always been kind of like the old school Braves. You have a good core of veterans. You have your prospects, and you have your bench players. And I think that every team always has a chance, but them being such a team that is very familiar with the postseason, they're always a team to watch out for.
Yeah, they definitely are. Greg, when you look at a guy like Stephen Piscotty, Randall Grichuk, had more than 20 homers in 2016 for the Cardinals. Do you think that the Cardinals could essentially give the Cubs a run for their money based on their batting rotation, or is it something that is clearly going to have to play out during the season?
Well, Rudy, and I know that Cory certainly knows this better than I do, that you win with pitching, and I think the critical thing for me is more Adam Wainwright and Carlos Martinez, and they got to pick up the slack for that was a big blow when Alex Reyes went down at the start of spring training. I think they're really counting on him to be a big part of their rotation, but I think those two kind of set the tone at the top. And, it just seems like they do find a way every year. It's such a great organization. But I think the offense is there. You mentioned Diaz. You talked about a couple of their outfielders, Dexter Fowler. They just, it always starts with the great Yadier Molina, who is the team captain essentially and sets the tone for the pitching staff. But even that lineup, he's almost like a second manager to Mike Matheny. My hope is that the Pirates are battling it out for that division with the Cubs and the Cardinals. I still think, and it's apparent, pretty obvious, that the cream of the crop is still the Cubs, not just in the National League Central Division, but you look around baseball. I mean, they're just so talented up and down. Their staff, they're going to be really tough to beat.
Yeah, they've been tough to beat and again, me and Cory were talking about this last year when they had taken this and then they were down a few games, came back and to win it in 6 games. When you look at the Cubs, when you look at the type of lineup, the lack of acquisitions of players to take place, they were so deep from pitching rotation, from hitting rotation. They were so deep. That's what really helped them get past the Cleveland Indians despite their best efforts. And we're talking Miller and having all those guys as a part of their pitching rotation certainly couldn't get it done against the Cubs. And they still have Kyle Schwarber, but he was a hit leadoff over Chris Bryant. And again, still very deep. Everybody's looking up to the Cubs right now. If you're a champion, you're trying to get taken down, you're trying to be the first person being dethroned. Do you think that based on, and we were talking about the Pirates, we're talking about the Cardinals, do you think either one of these teams have the ability to take the Cubs out in a head-to-head during the regular season to basically own them by the end, or is this still the Cubs NL Central to lose?
I'm interested to hear Cory on that one because I think I'm not as objective as I should be being a part of the Pirates organization. So I'd like to think the Pirates can overtake them, but that again, I'm a little biased.
What do you think, Cory?
I think in my opinion, I think you can't really count any team out because every team and player's goal is every year to get better. You know, I'm not saying that the Cubs are going to get worse, but there's always somebody getting better. You just hope that the Cubs didn't go in the offseason and get complacent, and be happy with last year. I know that the Baez's aren't. I know that Chris Bryant's aren't. I know that that team they have great managers, so they're going to come out the same fire. But other teams have to step their game up. The Cardinals are going to have to rely, like you said, on Martinez and Wainwright to have that staff. You have the Yadier Molina. The only thing I worry about with the Cardinals is maybe offensive inconsistency. You can always tell a team how good they are by when everybody's not hot, they're not hitting, and they're still winning games. And that's how I kind of view that as far as the Cardinals go. But the one thing I think is missing, though, these days, because of all the acquisitions, is the team rivalry. It's not like it used to be because too many players are going from team to team to team. So I think, to me, that the Cubs and the Cardinals rivalry also has kind of gone downhill just because there's too much player movement. But I'm definitely excited to see what the Pirates do with their star-studded outfit they have.
Yeah, I do as well. When you look at the Cards, they have a solid rotation. It's a 5-man deep. Could be, and again, it's all preemptive. Look, we haven't even played one full regular season game of baseball, but if there's any indication based on what you've seen in spring training past from the Cardinals that they're still very deep, and it's really surprising to see that the starters aren't being ranked as high as they should be. Greg, when you look at a team like the Milwaukee Brewers, who's been in 4th and 5th place respectfully, and the Reds and them seem to battle out for the last spot in the NL Central, do you think that the Brewers starting pitchers are an essential part of their bullpen, and can they really find a way to creep out of the shadows of basically nothing to find themselves in a conversation for the NL Central?
Okay. Well, in terms of the Brewers, I think some that got cut off there, Rudy. The Brewers, I think, are still a ways away from what I've seen. They're trying to make their way back to contender status. I think the same probably is true with the Reds. Going back to what Cory said, that's a pet peeve, and I guess I've been doing it so long that I'm starting to become one of those grumpy old men. But I'm with them on that 100%. The lack of rivalries, and I think some of that has to do with the fact that they share agents. They do bounce around from team to team. They get to know everybody, and the fraternizing just drives me up a wall. I just could never understand that a player trying to beat another player and standing at second base. He just doubled in a pair of runs to take the lead, and the shortstop or the second baseman is yucking it up with him. That drives me absolutely bonkers. And I do games with 3 former players, Steve Blass, who starred in the 1970s, a great pitcher for the Pirates, Bob Walk, who pitched 3 straight division title teams in the 90s, and John Wayner was a utility type player for the Pirates and played on the world champion Marlins. And and all three of them kind of agree with that mindset. That just is unbelievable. And I think replay now, what they've done with replay has helped force that as well. We will no longer see, they're trying to take contact completely out of the game of baseball with the no contact rule at the home plate, the Buster Posey rule, and the Chase Utley rule now at second base, where you basically, you certainly can't roll over a middle infielder. They're practically taking the slide away. You have to slide about 20 feet before you reach the bag. They're sterilizing the game, and I wish there was some way to kind of stop that. And I don't know if we'll ever revert back to the way it was. I guess my hope is it doesn't get any worse. That's a long-winded answer there, Rudy, to the question about the Brewers. Maybe out of kindness, because I think I think they're a ways away from contending.
I do as well. I know, Cory, you have to go. Cory, tell everybody where they can find you and how they can interact with you on social media.
I think my Instagram is Cory Aldridge, and my Twitter is Aldridge32. I cater to awesome food posts and things like that, and help. But yeah, please find me on my social media. Talk to me. I usually talk back. And, as always, I love being on your show. I definitely hope in the near future I can, especially around opening day. Let's make something happen.
Oh yeah, we'll do that. Thanks a lot, Cory. Appreciate it. Everybody go check out Cory Aldridge, one of my favorite Major League Baseball guests to have on the show. Thanks a lot. I appreciate you coming on. Greg, to answer your question in regards to the Milwaukee Brewers, they've been creeping. And to your point in regards to where they find themselves and the rebuilding situation, I believe them and the Cincinnati Reds certainly find themselves in very similar categories, because Cincinnati Reds have also been absolutely horrible for many, many years. It is just really sad that when you look at a $100 million contract for a guy like Homer Bailey, it's a mind scratcher. And when you think about over and over and over again, why they would give somebody like that so much money, does it make sense to you? Or is that something that you scratch your head about as well in regards to that contract?
Well, Rudy, when fans start to clamor for Neil Huntington and the Pirates to spend more money and to sign guys like Andrew McCutchen to a longer-term deal, why don't they go out and get guys? Why don't they make a splash like the Reds did with Homer Bailey or Joey Votto or Brandon Phillips? Anytime I start to feel the urge to scream along with the fans at Pirates management for being cheap, I am reminded of what happens when you allow that mentality to take over a front office. I really do believe the Reds and their ownership to show the fans that they were in it to win it and meant business, that they overspent for guys like Bailey and Votto and Phillips. And what that has done, it's handcuffed that organization for years. And I don't know that there's not a quick fix, really. It happened to the Philadelphia Phillies. It happened to the Milwaukee Brewers. The Brewers did it when they signed Prince Fielder and Ryan Braun many years ago and they made the big splash for the trade of Zach Greinke. And so by trading some players, they lose talent. By signing guys to longer-term deals, they handcuff themselves, and it throws them off for years. So, the Pirates just kind of quietly go about their business. They contend, as I said, they play meaningful baseball into September for a handful of years now. They are still considered one of the better teams in the league going into this season. And I think that is the blueprint for teams like the Pirates, and I think other clubs are kind of starting to learn from that. Not making the big splash signings or trades just to pacify a fan base. You got to hold your ground. You got to kind of be willing to take a whipping from the fan base and maybe from members of the media. Let them take their pot shots, and then you just, again, go about your business. Stay clear of that, stay focused, stay driven, and know that the way you're doing it is the right way to do it. And in the end, you'll come out better for it. And the Pirates are in great shape in terms of their payroll, the budget that they set, They won't get out of hand. They won't sign McCutcheon to a longer term deal unless Andrew and his agent decide that Andrew wants to stay and be a Pirate for the rest of his career and decide to take a whole lot less than what he would get on the open market. Same is true with Garrett Cole. They just won't do it, even though the fans will scream. Like, come on, sign Cole. Make a big trade. They wanted to trade for Jose Quintana or Chris Sale. Why don't the Pirates do that? Why don't they go out and make a big trade? Well, in order to trade for Chris Sale or Jose Quintana, they would have to give up Josh Bell, their first baseman this year, who just made it to the big leagues last season, a switch hitter who has a chance to be a big-time bopper in the lineup. Tyler Glasnow, we talked about earlier, has a chance to be a top-of-the-rotation guy. Word is that they also want their top position player prospect in Austin Meadows, who was just sent down yesterday to the minor leagues after hitting about 350 in spring training, and without a doubt looks to be like a big-time potential star in this game in the not-too-distant future. I mean, imagine just erasing them off your roster. And yeah, you bring in a pitcher who could help you win, but if he doesn't and you slip, and then this guy's contract is up, now not only can you not re-sign him because you can't afford him, but you've lost 3 or 4 of your best prospects, and again, it sets you back for years to come. And I think that's where the Reds are now. I think my guess is if they had to do it over again, they would not have signed those guys to those big-time contracts.
Yeah, you know what? When you're talking about the rebuilding mode, I believe this probably is true of the Pirates. I know it is for the Steelers. The Pittsburgh area has very rabid fans. I've been to Pittsburgh, and I've seen the kind of fans that are there. These people are rabid. They're diehard, and they want teams like the Steelers, like the Pirates, like the Penguins, despite, clearly the 2016 champion Pittsburgh Penguins. But when you look at the Pirates, I think there's a lot of things that are true within these organizations in that they're not going to spend an excessive amount of money to go off and get a number 1 rated pitcher from a scouting report. They're not going to go grab another high-end quarterback with Ben Roethlisberger still having a couple years left in him, and they're not going to be able to replace a guy like Sidney Crosby for the Pittsburgh Penguins because they have the money to do so. And I think fans lose the consciousness of the reality of these decisions and how they impact a team, not only from a roster standpoint, not only from a player standpoint, but from a mentality standpoint as well. And I think that based on the types of miscalculated contracts, you could put that in MLB, NBA, NFL, NHL. I think the most level-headed assortment out of all those is NHL because they don't play. They actually don't pay a lot of guys the type of money NFL players get, NBA and so on and so forth, because they believe that if they don't make those types of high dollar end moves, they can win with what they have. Does Neil Huntington believe that they can certainly win and go into September and actually win maybe a wild card NL game with what they have now?
Well, a couple things, Rudy. First of all, to answer that question, he has shown in the past that he's willing to make deals, and he has in the past at the deadline that helps put them over the top. Marlon Byrd was acquired a few years ago, was a big acquisition. Justin Morneau. Jay Happ last year, or 2 years ago. I mean, he's done that. May not be big-time flashy names, but if he thinks there are some players out there that he needs to acquire to put them over the top to either get to a wild card or win a division, he'll do that. He just won't, he won't go crazy. He won't overspend. He won't give up, too much talent. So I see that the Detroit Tigers are going to have Jacoby Jones probably be their starting center fielder this year. Jacoby Jones was traded 2 years ago from the Pirates for Joakim Soria. Soria brought over as a bullpen piece to try and help get the Pirates to the postseason. And that's the double-edged sword. So he goes and does that. Yeah, they got to the postseason, but it can be literally a wild card because you don't know what happens once you get to any postseason. Talent is a big part of it, but health and luck maybe even more so. So, be careful when you trade prospects because now Jacoby Jones is probably the Tigers' starting center fielder, and they're thrilled to have him. I've said for many, many years that people want a salary cap in baseball. I said there is a salary cap in baseball already. Each team has its individual salary cap. Bob Nutting, the owner of the Pirates, has a cap that he gives to Neil Huntington, the general manager, and says, you can't go over this budget. This is where we stand. Therefore, you have to make judicious moves, and he has done that we talked about a moment ago. The NFL, NBA, NHL all have league salary caps. Even with that, they have to make critical decisions. The reason why the Steelers are so good is not because of the salary cap. I've said this time and time again to people in Pittsburgh. It is because they've had great, stable ownership in the Rooney family for decades. They basically keep their general manager and scouting people in place, and they hire one coach and they keep him. That's why they've had Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, and Mike Tomlin for about close to 50 years, just those three. And that's why they're great. However, they still have to make, again, smart moves. I've asked people in speaking engagements who get on their high horse and tell me about how great the Steelers are because the salary cap is such a big deal, and that the reason they're big fans is because the Steelers keep their players. I say, oh really? Who was the featured running back 4 years ago for the Pittsburgh Steelers? And there's a long pause, and they struggle with that. And it's Willie Parker, and then I go to the offensive line, and and I go through the rotation on the offensive line, the skill player positions. Other than Ben Roethlisberger, even they have moved. In fact, I think it's Roethlisberger and one other player that eludes my memory at the moment, that the only two players on the current Steeler roster have been with the Steelers as long as Andrew McCutchen has been with the Pittsburgh Pirates. Everybody moves, everybody leaves. Peyton Manning left the Colts. Wayne Gretzky left the Edmonton Oilers. Babe Ruth left the Boston Red Sox. Teams move on, players move on. It's just the way it is. And smart teams, smart organizations figure that out. The Penguins are going to be faced with a dilemma of sorts, even though they just won the Stanley Cup and looks like they're headed toward a strong run this year. They have got to figure out a way to, even with the salary cap, pay all these stars. Crosby, Malkin, Fleury, now Matt Murray, goaltenders, and others. And how they do that will be fascinating because those are the players. A handful of players help in the NHL win championships. You need more than that in baseball, but you can do it when you have 2 or 3 stars in the NHL, and that's what the Penguins have done.
Yeah, absolutely right. Look, Father Time's undefeated. I've said this on the show many, many times, Greg, where you have to learn when to cut loose. And I understand that there's sentimentality I've talked about on the show before, that sometimes teams can be a little bit too sentimental when it comes to players. Fans can be even more so sentimental when it comes to players. When you look at guys like Andrew McCutchen, when you look at Ben Roethlisberger, when you look at Sidney Crosby, Father Time's undefeated. Eventually, they're not going to be able to play anymore because they either lose their interest in playing anymore. Their age also has a lot to do with the mentality of, well, I want to be able to stand upright instead of worried about relying on a cane the rest of my life. When it comes to moving and make better decisions, you said it probably better than anybody I've ever had on the show, that smart organizations make the smart moves and do things the smart way that continue to put their team, their organization, and their players in the best position to win. And that's across the board there in Pittsburgh between the Penguins, the Pirates, and the Steelers. And I've interviewed a ton of Steelers, Greg, and when I look at their mentality, it's not getting there. That's the journey. It's staying there. I'm more than confident to assume that that's the same for guys like Andrew McCutchen, for guys like Sidney Crosby and Fleury, and the assortment of Steeler players that have came and went. When you look at this NL, to go back to baseball more so specifically, when you look at the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, what is your prediction? Of course, a little biased maybe because of the Pirates involved in the mix, but where do you truly see this laying down when it comes to September? Chicago, Pirates, Cardinals, Brewers, and Reds. What's your order of being first and or into a wild card?
I think, again, it's impossible to predict. In fact, I kind of kiddingly, we meet with all of our radio network stations in January. We got about a 50-station radio network in the Pittsburgh area, and we meet with them over a 2-day seminar and talk about selling radio time and what we could do better on the air as the announcers and so on, and our formats. And we always have an announcer roundtable where they ask any questions of the 5 Pirate broadcasters, and each year we do the predictions, and I always get the people in the crowd kind of laughing because I say, 98 wins. And they'll say, 98 wins? How can you predict that? And I said, well, I've been doing it for this is my 24th year, and every year I predict about 95 to 100 wins, and I knew one of these years I'd be right, and I was there I was right 2 years ago when they won 98 games. I was spot on. So I'll do it again because I'm biased, and that anything can happen. I think the Pirates, as I mentioned earlier, if that rotation can fall into place, those pitchers figure it out. McCutchen has a bounce back year. I think they could win, maybe not 98, but I think it's a possibility of a 90-win team there. And I'm hopeful that the Cubs fall back a little bit, and with that, the Pirates can win the division. If not, roll the dice with that one-game wild card game. Pirates won one of those in 2013. They beat the Cincinnati Reds. They took the Cardinals to Game 5 of the best of 5 NLDS in 2013. Had a little bit of luck on their way. They could have gone to the National League Championship Series. So that is a big-time roll of the dice, that one-game wild card playoff. They ran into a buzzsaw with Ross Baumgartner 3 years ago, and then 2 years ago they ran into Jake Arrieta. And my hope is if they get to that wild card, then they beat whatever team they're playing, and they move forward in that the wild race that really is the postseason. You just absolutely never know what can happen. And again, just a lot, fingers crossed. Hopeful they stay healthy and things fall in place. Either way, Rudy, I think that they will be a contender. And I think the Cardinals will be right there. My guess would be if I were pushed into the corner, that things where they are now, looks like the Cubs can win the division, the Pirates second, Cardinals third. But I reserve the right to change my opinion during the course of the season.
You're more than welcome to do that anytime you want, Greg. You know what's kind of interesting? I look at the lineup and I think to myself, yeah, Cubs, Pirates, Cardinals. That's how I had my list as well, based on the talent, based on the acquisitions, based on scouting reports, based on and the spring training is relatively vanilla to some degree, not like the NFL. NFL is totally vanilla in the preseason manner. But yeah, no, that's exactly how I see it. So we're on the same page there, and and I'll have you back on at some point. I know it's a long season. I know it's busy for you, and I'm relatively confident to suggest that trying to get you back on will be tough as the season progresses. But I want to thank you so much for taking your time out to join me here on the Rude Dog Show.
Really enjoyed it, Rudy. I hope you'll have me back on. That'll be a lot of fun. Thanks so much, though.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks, Greg. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, Greg Brown. Thanks a lot. Thank you so much, Greg. We'll be in touch. That was fantastic. Look, I'm out of time. I ran through everything, including commercials. So Anthony Gilbert, new-game-plan.com, seregumil.us can certainly get you the vitamins that you need for maximizing your potential, your health, and of course, johnmalecki.com, where you can turn your wood fantasy into a reality. It's JOHNMALECKI.com. And thank you so much. This is Rudy Reyes on the Rude Dog Show on WBLZsports.com.